First of all, you heard from the previous speakers that it's very important to address land degradation, and there is little I can add to that. We have seen that land degradation is already covering 30% of the global land area, and land improvement is happening only for the last 3 decades in 3% of the area. So factor of 1 to 10. So land degradation is 10 times happening in 10 times bigger area than land improvement. So we are very far away from land degradation neutral world. And of course, the biggest impact of land degradation is on the poorest households, both crop producers and pastoralists, because they depend on this natural resource more than others. And addressing land degradation is also important in that context for achieving sustainable development goals. Without addressing land degradation, probably their achievement would be very challenging. So the research questions we try to answer in this part of the study is what are the causes of land degradation and how can the Mirsad can facilitate sustainable land management. And within individual, these are broad research questions. Within individual chapters, you can find answers to some more specific research questions, like does land tenure security lead to more sustainable land management or not? As Ephraim said, there were a lot of different studies in the past which looks into this issue. What we try to do here is to have not some consistent, similar, comparable methodology in various locations and settings, socioeconomic. Here in the map you see the locations of the case studies across different agroecological and global biomes. So you can see there are the studies we have are more or less representative of the most major biomes around the world. So in terms of the factors which may lead to sustainable land management, the analysis were conducted at different scales, from global, regional, to household level, so national level, using household surveys data. At global level, we used pixel data from remotely sensed satellite data. So some of the factors which we found consistently leading to associated with sustainable land management across scales and locations, different settings, different conditions. So these were rule of law and respect for property rights, better market access, especially in densely populated areas. Land tenure security we found very important, which helps to incentivize land users to make long-term investments. And availability of non-farm jobs, which are related to different spillovers, both in terms of labor, capital, innovations, and also, of course, access to extension and knowledge and dissemination. One of the aspects that Professor Lal mentioned, Malthus versus Bozarab theory. What we see in these study examples, these are two very plausible scenarios. So depending on the interplay of population density with other factors, like sustainable, whether there is secure land tenure, whether there is a rule of law, effective government institutions. So the scenario may change. In some contexts, more densely populated areas were able, because of access to other factors like better rule of law, for example, to achieve more sustainable land management. In other cases, more population density were associated with more degradation because other factors were not in place. So one factor alone may have different diverging impacts depending how it interacts with the other drivers of land degradation. So this map shows basically bivariate correlation between government effectiveness and land degradation. As you can see in those blue areas here, and in the red areas are those in blue areas there where government effectiveness has improved and land degradation also decreased. In red areas are those areas where effectiveness has decreased, also land degradation has decreased. So coming to the more household level data, household level finding, when we look at to Central Asia, what we find that in most cases, the poorest households, the poorest 30% of households, have operate the more degraded lands than their richer counterparts. So the poor have more degraded lands than the rich. But when you come to the adoption of sustainable land management practices, you see the situation is almost opposite. The poor adopt the least among the other socioeconomic categories of agricultural households. And the adoption rates remain low, unfortunately, not all, across many countries. For example, in Kenya, you can see that 60% of households do not adopt any, not a single SLM technology. While what we see in many contexts, the most profitable sustainable land management technology is adopted the least. That seems very strange. The most adopted ones are the ones which are less profitable. There are more profitable ones which are not adopted. Of course, it seems like a paradox, but very likely the households have very rational reasons why they are doing so. So we can discuss this more maybe in the discussion part of the session. So what we need to do to build momentum for addressing land degradation, of course, it's very important that now global community is trying to address this problem as well through the Sustainable Development Goals. Addressing land degradation will not only contribute to the SDG number 15, which is specifically about this land degradation and biodiversity loss. Professor Lal pointed out this, but also it will help in achieving many different other sustainable development goals, like eradicating poverty, achieving no hunger, and also on climate action. But at the same time, based on our results, what we see that addressing land degradation also is dependent on the action on some other SDGs, like, for example, having effective institutions, which are crucial for sustainable land management. So, three areas which I would like to conclude my presentation with is, as Ephraim said, and what we find in all our case studies, returns from action are very high. They are 5 times, 6 times higher than cost of inaction. So why farmers are not adopting this sustainable land management technologies? This is if it's so profitable. Well, one of the reasons is probably because, as Ephraim said, half of these benefits are global public goods. They are in form of ecosystem services which everybody enjoys. They are not only provisional services. And farmers, when they take action, they are more likely to take action if they are able to internalize some of these benefits. And in that sense, for example, payments for ecosystem services could allow to do that. There are some successful examples from some countries in the world, for example, in Costa Rica. And what we find, again, emphasis that it's very important. Some of the achievements in some countries we have looked were made because of there was a strong drive towards achieving more effective institutions. So continuing emphasis on effective and accountable institutions, international development programs, can be a low-hanging fruit to help in achieving sustainable land management. But of course, land itself alone cannot be looked into separately. Households do not make their decisions on land only thinking about land. They also make their decisions in an integrated manner. So we also need to analyze land degradation and how to address it, taking into account water, energy, food security, in so-called nexus platforms, so that we can minimize externalities and trade-offs between them. Thank you very much.